importance of the advocacy when it comes to combating the very serious, the grave violations of religious freedom that are happening in India. This particular session is focused on persecution against Christians, but we know that there's violations happening towards a number of religious minority groups, not least Muslim groups. And so that's something where this is not just a Christian thing, it's not just a Muslim thing, but you are seeing widespread violence and discrimination happening against all sorts of religious minority groups in India at an alarming rate, unfortunately at an increasing rate. And it's something that, as Matias mentioned, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom last year, after a lot of great advocacy, went ahead and said, no, we need to consider India to be a country of particular concern. And then they did that again. And I think that just goes to show everybody, especially folks who are in Congress, staffers, members of Congress, that this is a very serious issue. It's something that there is well-documented information on, that you have legal structures that are making it very difficult for religious minorities to exercise fully their rights to religious freedom in the country, in all sorts of manners, in terms of worship, in terms of simple community gathering, just living normally, right? In terms of speech, in terms of a lot of different things. And so really want to appreciate that. Like Matias said, my name is Sean Nelson. I'm legal counsel for our global religious freedom team with ADF International. ADF International is an international legal human rights organization that focuses on protecting fundamental freedoms for people all around the world. Our team focuses on places where the persecution is the greatest in many different countries, and the sorts of countries that are feature regularly on USERF and State Department reports. There is an independent ADF as well in India, ADF India, and they do tons of great work on religious freedom and on protecting fundamental freedoms generally. You may want to go to their website, adfindia.org. But I wanted to just go through a couple of maybe brief remarks on some specifics. Matias laid out, I think, very well a lot of the broader concerns and really provided a great roadmap for all of the items that are happening in India to Christians. So you're talking about violence, you're talking about the anti-conversion laws, the so-called freedom of religion acts that are anything but that, but that are just pretextual to justify various kinds of mob violence or arrest or harassment that infringe in just the most basic ways. The idea that you should have to go to the police department and tell them, hey, in 2 weeks, I am going to be going to convert here, and here's my minister, and here's all the family members that are going to be attending, and subject me to an interrogation to make sure that I really deeply mean it in my heart, and also subject my pastor to that. And I'm not even sure if you, as the police officer, are really sympathetic or looking out for my best interests. I don't know who you have connections to or who you're talking to otherwise. To think that that's at all a reasonable system to prevent things like forced conversions, which of course people want to prevent forced conversions, things like kidnapping and violence and all that kind of thing. But that's not what these laws are about. They're about harassing religious minorities in the states that have adopted them. And it's worrying that increasingly more states are adopting these things. And in fact, the influence of this is spreading. In Nepal, there was they've adopted some of these types of laws as well. And there's a very big case right now. I think USERF referred to it very recently, involving, I think it was some nuns up there who were accused of converting people and have had charges brought against them. In any event, I do want to go through some of the specific numbers because I don't believe Matias went through those, but I'll just talk briefly. So last year, so in 2020, international human rights organizations recorded more than 279 acts of violence in 2020, right? That was an increase from previous years. To put that in context, those are recorded numbers. Those are numbers that you might be able to see in newspapers or that people feel comfortable reporting. As we know, when you're an embattered minority, often you don't feel comfortable doing that. In India, we know that the media is not particularly free when it comes to being able to report a minority issue. So these numbers are certainly low numbers, but they're alarming even just by themselves. Out of 28 states, we see regular attacks against Christians in 16 out of those 28 states. I want to talk about just this year, the numbers, and my computer is acting a little slow here, so let me scroll to that area. So one group has reported at least 310 incidents of persecution against Christians from January to September of 2021. Just in the last quarter, so June to August 2021, let's see, you have hundreds of different folks who are affected by different kinds of incidents, right? Because each of these incidents can involve dozens of people, right? They involve both individuals, but also communities themselves. You've had that with Muslims as well. One database recorded 1,260 incidents this year in terms of various kinds of incidents. To give an idea of the kinds of things that we would normally see. So one simple, one of the more common kinds of things that you see is mob violence against churches that are having worship services, right? So you usually have a small group of Christian worshipers, you have a small church, and one day they are worshiping and they come to find a large mob gathered outside their home or outside the church, and the mob tries to shut down the church, right? Sometimes they will completely attack, destroy, and desecrate the church. Sometimes they will physically attack the members of the church. Often when the police arrive, they do not arrest the attackers. They don't arrest anybody in the mob. They arrest the members of the church. And then they lock the doors of the church. And they say, we're doing this to protect you and to calm the violence and all that kind of stuff. And okay, let's say you're doing that, but then why isn't there ever any follow-up to arrest the people who did lead the mob violence? Why isn't there any actual follow-up? And that issue of impunity is a massive issue. And I think one of the reasons why USERP has recommended India for CPC status is because there does seem to be this culture of impunity from many officials at different levels of the government, even though it's non-state actors who may be committing these particular kinds of attacks. So, this is one example. In June 2021, a mob forcibly chased away 8 Christian families in a village in Odisha after destroying their homes. They also humiliated some of the women who were part of the families. Those Christian families then have to seek shelter in a forest near the town, right? They aren't even allowed to live peacefully in the village that they're calling home. This is something that we're seeing actually quite a lot, are various extremist groups or mobs that are literally chasing Christian families out of villages and forcing them to live in the jungle without shelter, without anything. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it is the absolute reality of the kinds of marginalization that you're seeing and the social exclusion that you're seeing these Christian families face. That's how hostile some of the mobs can be. There name you a number of these. June 2021, another instance in Odisha. April 2021, another Christian pastor and his wife attacked. They sustained severe injuries. The assailants attacked them with rods and sticks. July 2021, this is an interesting case. There was a temporary church that was demolished by a local government authority. There's never been any explanations of this. There was no notice. It just happened. And we've seen that actually with Muslim groups as well, local development agencies just kind of demolishing mosques or knocking them down without any notice, without any hearings, without any explanation. I don't want to take up too much time because I know that we only have a little bit of time, but I do want to emphasize just this last point. Well, before I get to that last point, I do want to say one of the acts that can make it very difficult to get help to the people who are there is the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in 2010. This is being increasingly used against any suspicion of foreign NGOs assisting or working within India, and that makes it very difficult a lot of times to get information out or to assist. And that makes it more important for the international community to act against those sorts of restrictions. I want to close by just talking about citing some quotes about anti-conversion laws, about the issues from a former UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. This is not just us saying it. It's not even just the US Commission on International Religious Freedom or even the State Department, even if they haven't designated India. You can read a lot of this stuff in their reports, their annual Earth reports, but the United Nations as well. When you're talking about these freedom of religion, so-called laws, the former Special Rapporteur said these laws, this draft legislation has had adverse consequences for religious minorities and have fostered mob violence against them, end quote. Another quote, there's a risk that freedom of religion acts may become a tool in the hands of those who wish to use religion for vested interest or to persecute individuals on the grounds of their religion or belief. So that's the sort of thing, right? This is being raised at the international level by the person at the United Nations who is designated to examine and take note of the violations of religious freedom that happen in the world. So this is not just groups here saying it. It's not just people who are advocates for this. It is independent, internationally recognized bodies and experts saying this is a really serious issue. It's a systemic issue. It's leading to mob violence. We see the mob violence happening every day. So if you're a staffer, please do talk to your member of Congress about this issue. Talk to people who have some influence when it comes to policy with India, and just raise this, that, look, this stuff has to stop. The violence against religious minorities in India has to stop. The discrimination has to stop. So thank you.